As I was saying, here on the ground in Houston, we have Flight Director Garrett Hain, who's overseeing today's spacecraft departure. The flight director's role today is to lead and work closely with their team of flight controllers. And they're also responsible to gather information and data from all of the flight controllers in the room and lead the team through various major milestones. The flight director also approves or declines suggestions based on pre-established flight rules. Sitting right next to the flight director, to his right, to Garrett's right, we have Capcom. Today's Capcom, or capsule communicator, to Garrett's right is Aaron Edwards. Capcom serves as the primary communication between mission control and the crew aboard station. While there are several members in Mission Control Houston here in the flight control room, another member of the Mission Control team who's been busy supporting today's operation is the Robo Console. Today's Robo Flight Controller is Casey Chen. Casey has been working with the Canada Arm 2 robotic arm, maneuvering it to complete work outside the space station. And I wanted to cover one more console position while we're on the air this morning, and that is the VVO, the Visiting Vehicle Officers, who are Nicholas Lopez and Nate Yotalto. They're supporting and monitoring with the flight control teams at Northrop Grumman's facility in Dulles, Virginia for today's departure. We are just about a minute away from the go, no go poll for the release and departure of Northrop Grumman's 23rd commercial resupply departure from the International Space Station this morning. This morning, you'll hear Capcom or Aaron's voice during today's operation communicating with European Space Agency astronaut Sophie Adeno, who is aboard the space station. Adeno will be monitoring the departure of Northrop Grumman's 23rd commercial resupply services for NASA to the orbiting laboratory from the station's cupola. In addition to Adeno, there are a total of 7 crew members living and working aboard the space station. Expedition 74 represents 3 different space agencies, including NASA, the European Space Agency, and Roscosmos. Last month, Crew 12.
Station Houston on Space to Ground 2. Sophie, you are go for Cygnus configuration checks. Perform Step 2 in 1.602, release and departure monitoring.
Step 2 for 1.602. Running now.
Go, no go poll is currently underway.
Station Houston on Space to Ground 2 for the awareness of the crew. You have 3 minutes to a no exercise constraint. That's on your timeline.
Copies. And for Sophie, Cygnus configuration checks complete. Crew is ready for release and departure.
And we copy.
Excellent. We heard several callouts right now, but in the room here in the flight control room, we did pull go for departure, and you heard Capcom speaking to Sophie Adeno, who also confirmed she is ready for today's operation. We can see views of the cargo spacecraft attached to the Canadarm2 robotic arm. We are currently in orbital daylight as the space station is flying over the west coast of South America. So as I was saying a little bit earlier, Expedition 74 does represent 3 different space agencies, including NASA, the European Space Agency, and Roscosmos. Last month, Crew 12 joined Expedition 74, which includes the NASA astronauts Chris Williams, Jessica Meir, and Jack Hathaway, and European Space Agency astronaut who I shared earlier, Sophie Adeno, as well as 3 Roscosmos cosmonauts, Sergei Kuzverkev, Sergei Mikhaev, and Andrei Fedyaev. Expedition 74 began in December 2025 following the departure of the Soyuz MS-27 spacecraft. Expedition 74 will continue into July of this year. Good morning, and if you're just joining us, we are coming to you live from the International Space Station Flight Control Room covering the departure of Northrop Grumman's Cygnus XL spacecraft from the International Space Station. You are looking at live views of the Cygnus spacecraft attached to the Canadarm2 robotic arm. Station is currently flying 260 statute miles above South America right now, and we see some great views of the solar arrays deployed on the Cygnus spacecraft. The view currently on your screen is from the end effector of the Canadarm2 robotic arm. This is the view that we will see as the Cygnus spacecraft continues to back away from the robotic arm and from the space station this morning. So we'll continue to monitor that view while we are going through our coverage this morning.
And Sophie, it's Houston on 2, just for your information. We are down 1 IMU. We're still go, but we're going to take a couple minutes to talk about it down here, so we might be a minute or two delayed from our planned release time.
Sophie copies.
And you just heard that call out between Aaron and Sophie Adenau. We are tracking for a release that might be potentially delayed, but we'll continue to monitor here in the flight control room.
And Station Houston, go for Cygnus departure on time. Perform steps 3 and 4 in 1.602. Release and departure monitoring.
Go for departure, and I'm performing steps 3 and 4 of 1.602.
Good call-outs right there, and we just heard that we are just about under 2 minutes away from an on-time departure of Northrop Grumman's commercial resupply mission for NASA to the International Space Station. Once again, you are looking at live views of the Cygnus XL spacecraft attached to the Canadarm2 robotic arm. And that's about 15 meters away from the International Space Station.
And Sophie, ISS thrusters are inhibited and ground is go for release.
The ground go for release.
Good call-outs right there this morning. At this time, we just received the go for release and departure of the Cygnus XL spacecraft from the flight control teams here in Mission Control Houston, as well as the Northrop Grumman teams in Dulles, Virginia.
We're proceeding with release.
Keep proceeding.
Release commanded.
This is Mission Control Houston as we continue joint operations.
Release commanded.
And we heard a great call out there. Release was commanded of the Cygnus XL cargo spacecraft this morning at 6:05 a.m. Central, 7:05 a.m. Eastern. As we continue joint operations between NASA and Northrop Grumman's team at their facility in Dulles, Virginia. And we should be seeing that drift out from this view right now of the end effector.
Yep, and confirm snare is open, and I begin monitoring drift out.
And we heard that call out right there. Snares are open, and the Cygnus XL spacecraft is continuing to drift out. With this on-time release and confirmation from the flight controllers here, they have disabled the space station thrusters. This happens when the robotic arm releases and the spacecraft, and it releases, the spacecraft, so the space station stays in the same orientation with no motion. Teams do this to make sure there are no automatic thrusters that are firing.
Wind has exited the lead. Go for back away.
We copy, proceeding with back away.
Good call-outs right there as we're seeing the spacecraft back away or drift away from the space station. The spacecraft is flying free away from the robotic arm. Cygnus was successfully released from the International Space Station robotic arm this morning at 6:06 a.m. Central, 7:06 a.m. Eastern. At the time of release, the space station was flying 260 statute miles above the South Pacific.
Back away in progress.
Good callouts for back away, and we see the Cygnus XL spacecraft continuing to back away from the Canadarm2 robotic arm.
That's 1.5 meters.
We copy.
And as mentioned earlier, European Space Agency astronaut Sophie Adeno is monitoring today's operation from the space station's cupola. She's going to continue to monitor as the spacecraft continues to back away from the International Space Station. We heard call-outs for proceeding with back away as well as back away in progress, and that basically means that ground teams began the commanding for the spacecraft to back away, and then the back away began, and we're seeing good views here of that separation.
Vehicle clearance, approximately 4.5 meters.
We copy. Thank you.
Great call-outs there as the vehicle continues to back away. So we're seeing a great close-up view from the International Space Station's robotic arm. You've been hearing conversation between European Space Agency astronaut Sophie Adeno as well as Aaron from our capsule communicator.
Eastern Station, Sophie, should I wait for your go for the back away complete?
We're just catching up to you. Back away complete.
Okay, so performing step 4 of procedure 1.602.
We concur.
You just heard that call out for back away complete, and we are standing by for the departure burn. Once again, Cygnus was successfully released from the International Space Station's robotic arm at 6:06 a.m. Central, 7:06 a.m. Eastern. At the time of release, the space station was flying over the South Atlantic. So as mentioned, we are standing by for that departure burn. The departure burn is a 6-minute and 40-second departure burn, and it will place the spacecraft in a 24-hour safe trajectory away from the International Space Station.
Depart commended.
And we copy. Cygnus departure burn is in progress. Monitor departure burn, step 5 in 1.602.
Monitoring step 5 in 1.602.
Great callouts as well as views that we're seeing right here. The departure burn is underway. As mentioned, it will last about 6 minutes and 40 seconds. This departure burn continues to move the spacecraft further away from the space station, which is currently just a little over 18 meters away. During the departure burn, we will hear a keep out sphere exit, so we are standing by for that call out. As mentioned, we are standing by for the keep out sphere exit. There are two boundaries around the International Space Station. The first is called the keep out sphere, which is like in the neighborhood of the space station. So once Cygnus passes the keep out sphere, it then travels further out and passes the approach ellipsoid. This is ultimately will set the cargo spacecraft on its 24-hour safe trajectory. These boundaries are safety boundaries that require go, no-go polls, and they're used in the unlikely event that something goes wrong with the Cygnus spacecraft as it departs. The first zone that I mentioned, called the keep out sphere, it's a zone that consists of an imaginary sphere around the space station with a radius of 200 meters. And then the second zone, a little bit further out, called the approach ellipsoid, is an imaginary shape measuring 4 kilometers by 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers. Essentially, think of it as a large 3-dimensional oval. These boundaries are just another chance to confirm that all of the guidance, navigation, and control systems are working correctly on Cygnus as it continues to move away from the space station. If you are just joining us, we are coming to you live from the International Space Station Flight Control Room here at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. We are here to continue our coverage of Northrop Grumman's 23rd commercial resupply services for NASA to the space station. The Cygnus XL cargo spacecraft, named the SS William Willie McCool, is Northrop Grumman's 22nd commercial resupply services mission to the space station. Following a 175-day stay, the cargo spacecraft departed the space station this morning at 6:06 a.m. Central, 7:06 a.m. Eastern, as the station was flying 260 miles above the South Atlantic.
Houston Station, step 6 complete.
And Sophie, yes, departure burn is complete, and in fact, Cygnus has exited the 200-meter keep-out sphere. And from all of us here in Houston and our partners at Northrop Grumman and our robotics team in Montreal, we want to thank you for your assistance with the departure today. We also want to thank Cygnus as it drifts back to Earth for a job well done. This extra-large format vehicle brought aboard thousands of pounds of science and supplies, and perhaps most importantly for you folks, snacks. Missions like this don't happen without the dedication and teamwork of so many people across NASA and our partners, and that spirit of cooperation and excellence was captured in the very name of this vehicle, the SS Commander William McCool, someone who embodied those same values every day. Thanks for your help today, Sophie.
Thank you to everyone on the ground in Canada, in the U.S., and everywhere all over the world for making this beautiful event happen. It's magic to see and to witness how technology and science, what we can do with all of this. It's very beautiful from here. I'm going to hand over the mic to Jack. He has a few words to say.
Thanks, Houston, and thanks, Sophie. Good morning, everyone. I'm U.S. Navy Captain and NASA astronaut Jack Hathaway, a member of Expedition 74 on board the International Space Station. While astronauts serve long-duration missions, resupply and cargo vehicles bring new science experiments, critical hardware to carry out our mission, and care packages from our families. Leaving us today is a Cygnus cargo vehicle that carries with it a tradition of naming the spacecraft to honor someone special. This Cygnus is named in honor of Captain Willie McCool, a NASA astronaut, a naval aviator who was serving as pilot of the Space Shuttle Columbia on STS-107 in 2003, when he and the crew tragically perished during re-entry. We remember the crew and hold their families in our hearts and prayers as we continue our shared mission of human spaceflight. For me personally, it's a great honor to have followed some of Willie McCool's footsteps as an Eagle Scout, Naval Academy grad, naval aviator and test pilot, and a first spaceflight assignment as a spacecraft pilot. He was an inspiration to me when I was a young naval officer, and I strive every day to be worthy of the legacy and the example he set. I feel grateful today to be living and working on the ISS with my fellow crewmates while the Cygnus spacecraft Willie McCool was berthed to Node 1 Nadir, our Earth-facing docking port. As we watch the Cygnus depart, know that she performed her critical resupply mission flawlessly, and today we say fair winds and following seas as she heads off to complete her mission. Following naval tradition, we will now render departure honors by ringing the ISS ship's bell. Spacecraft Willie McCool, departing.
Thank you for that, Sophie and Jack. We appreciate it. And like you said, it was a job well done.
Great words from the crew, both ESA astronaut Sophie Adeno and NASA astronaut Jack Hathaway. You heard several callouts and conversations just recently. Depart burn was completed, and shortly after that departure burn was completed, you heard that Cygnus did exit that keep-out sphere. This means that the SS Willie McCool spacecraft has now exited the International Space Station's 200-meter boundary. Here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room, flight controllers in Mission Control are in joint operations working with their counterparts at Northrop Grumman's Control Center in Dulles, Virginia. Earlier this morning, robotics operators here in Mission Control received the go to demate Cygnus, and then they used the Canadarm2 robotic arm to uninstall the spacecraft from its port and guide it away from the space station into its release position. Release was commanded and snares were opened as the spacecraft free flew away from the robotic arm. And the cargo spacecraft was successfully released from the International Space Station's robotic arm at 6:06 a.m. Central, 7:06 a.m. Eastern, as the space station was flying 260 statute miles above the Atlantic. Once released, Cygnus completed a successful departure burn that lasted approximately 6 minutes and 40 seconds, and then it just crossed the 200-meter keep-out sphere. We are now standing by, waiting for it to cross the approach ellipsoid. You are seeing room views here of the International Space Station Flight Control Room as we continue a signal handover between satellites. As mentioned, we are waiting for NG's Northrop Grumman's 23rd Commercial Resupply Services Cygnus XL spacecraft to depart the approach ellipsoid. That's essentially a large three-dimensional oval measuring 4 kilometers by 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers that you see on your screen right now. It's the final boundary, putting the spacecraft in its 24-hour free drift trajectory. So while we are under 10 minutes away from the approach ellipsoid exit, once the vehicle crosses it, joint operations will end. So we'll then wrap up coverage, and responsibility of the vehicle is handed back to Northrop Grumman. Following a de-orbit engine firing, Cygnus will begin a planned re-entry in which the spacecraft will safely and harmlessly burn up in the Earth's atmosphere. We're under 10 minutes away from the approach ellipsoid exit, and a unique capability with Cygnus is its trash disposal. While the astronauts aboard the International Space Station unloaded the 11,000 pounds that Cygnus delivered back in September, since then the crew has repacked Cygnus again with trash and other unwanted items over the last 175 days. Yesterday, the crew aboard the space station finished packing Cygnus and configured the spacecraft for its release and departure today.
Station Houston on space to ground 2 for Sophie.
She's listening on 6.
Hey, we're about to enter a bit of an LOS here, so that no T2 constraint will remain until about 11:42 and an additional 10 minutes after that. We're not quite finished our commanding.
Copy, no T2. Do you want me to leave the Lab 1 cam then without the wide attachments on the Monitor 1?
Thanks, Sophie. We're actually done with that view, so you're go with your next activities.
Okay, thank you.
You just heard great callouts there between Capcom and the crew aboard station. We are currently going through a period of loss of signal, so although ground controllers will continue to monitor the approach ellipsoid exit, we are here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room. It's Northrop's tradition to name each Cygnus spacecraft after an individual who has made significant contributions to human spaceflight. The NG-23 Cygnus spacecraft is named in honor of NASA astronaut William Willie McCool. McCool was an astronaut and naval aviator who piloted the 2003 Columbia spacecraft and lost his life during the mission. His naval career included over 2,800 flight hours and in 24 aircraft and more than 400 career arrestments. After being selected by NASA to become an astronaut in April 1996, he reported to the Johnson Space Center in August 1996. McCool completed 2 years of training and evaluation and was qualified for flight assessment as a pilot. Willie McCool's spaceflight career reached its pinnacle with his role as pilot of STS-107 aboard the Space Shuttle Columbia. The mission, which launched on January 16, 2003, was dedicated to scientific research, with the crew conducting approximately 80 experiments over a 16-day period. Tragically, the mission ended abruptly on February 1, 2003, when Columbia disintegrated during re-entry, just 16 minutes before the scheduled landing, resulting in the loss of McCool and his fellow crew members.
And Station Houston.
Houston, station on 2 for ARED.
Go ahead. We've got 1 minute before an LOS.
Yeah, I see it coming. I'll just package it because it's probably an answer that you'll have to check on. Chris did. He put a crew note. He did tighten in order to shorten the rope. He did 2 turns on the tension mechanism knob. However, now the cable arm is popping out again. So during my workout, I went back to cable exercises, but it still wasn't staying in. We're wondering if the enemy might recommend taking one of those turns off. Basically, the rope is now just under 7 inches.
We copy and we'll assess and break. Sophie, if you are still on with us, you can no perform step 2 in your DAC activity.
And while we are continuing to monitor today's operations, that was the voice of NASA astronaut Jessica Meir speaking with Capcom here in the room. While operations are taking place, the crew is continuing to go about their daily routine, which includes exercise. So that was that conversation you heard right there. So going back to Willie McCool, I wanted to also share that in all he had logged 15 days, 22 hours, and 20 minutes in space. And in recognition of his exemplary service and sacrifice, McCool was posthumously awarded the Congressional Space Medal of Honor, the NASA Spaceflight Medal, the NASA Distinguished Service Medal, and the Defense Distinguished Service Medal. Willie McCool's legacy endures through his contributions to aviation and space exploration. So as we continue to stand by for the approach ellipsoid exit, which should be happening any minute now. If you're just joining us, we are providing live departure coverage of Northrop Grumman's 23rd Commercial Resupply Services mission for NASA to the space station. The cargo spacecraft was successfully released from the International Space Station's robotic arm at 6:06 a.m. Central, 7:06 a.m. Eastern. Once released, Cygnus completed a successful departure burn that lasted approximately 6 minutes and 40 seconds. And it then crossed the 200-meter keep-out sphere, and we are now standing by for it to cross the approach ellipsoid. We are currently in joint operations with Northrop Grumman's team in Dulles, Virginia. Once again, just standing by for the call out for approach ellipsoid exit. And we just received confirmation in the room that the SS William McCool has exited the approach ellipsoid. The Cygnus XL spacecraft is now 1,000 meters away from the International Space Station. The vehicle has moved outside the Keep-Out Sphere and outside of the approach ellipsoid, the two major milestones that take the spacecraft outside of the neighborhood of the space station. Joint operations between NASA's International Space Station Flight Control Room and Northrop Grumman's team in Dulles, Virginia, have now concluded. Northrop now leads the final phase of the cargo spacecraft's trash disposal, but first Cygnus will be commanded to gradually lower its orbit. It'll execute a series of, descent delta velocity burn Saturday morning, slowing the spacecraft to lower its altitude. And then about 4.5 hours later into Saturday morning, the spacecraft will perform a re-entry burn, once again slowing it down. This two-part braking maneuver will allow the trash-filled receptacle so it can slip out of orbit and safely burn up in Earth's atmosphere around noon Central on Saturday over the Pacific. Following the go to demate Cygnus this morning, the Canadarm2 robotic arm uninstalled the spacecraft from its port to guide it away from the space station and into its release position. The SS William McCool was released from the International Space Station this morning at 6:06 a.m. Central, 7:06 a.m. Eastern, as the station was flying 260 statute miles above the South Atlantic. Once released, Cygnus completed a successful departure burn that lasted approximately 6 minutes and 40 seconds. It then crossed the Keep-Out Sphere and approach ellipsoid. With that, joint operations between NASA and Northrop Grumman have been completed. Thank you so much for joining us this morning as we followed along the release and departure of Northrop Grumman's 23rd Cargo Resupply Services mission for NASA to the International Space Station. You can follow all things International Space Station at nasa.gov/station. This is Mission Control Houston.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The program is about to begin. Please welcome to the stage, Director of the Ronald Reagan Institute, Mr. Roger Zakheim.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you. Roger Zakheim here, Director of the Reagan Institute. The Reagan Institute is the D.C. office of the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation Institute. Here in D.C., we lead the public affairs, public policy, think tank work of the foundation. It's wonderful to have you here, and it's my honor to welcome you to the 2026 National Security Innovation Base Summit as we release the 4th annual NSIB report card. We're very excited for what we have in store today. We're going to hear from members of Congress, senior officials from the Pentagon, thought leaders, investors, technology and industry executives. Here at the Institute, our guiding philosophy is peace through strength. And this event demonstrates the importance of that principle in ensuring our country is prepared to meet the threats of tomorrow. Now, cooperation amongst the players represented in this room, I'm grateful to all of you for being here, is crucial to maintaining America's technological edge. It requires leaders from across the political spectrum, you'll see that in our first discussion here, and from the public and private sector to solve our hardest national security problems. It will take all of us to tackle the persistent problems and create actionable change. That is the goal of the NSIB report card in our event today, to convene the most important voices to discuss where we need to improve and how to do it. As our report card shows, we have work ahead of us. Those grades aren't great. There's some good things as well. But there's definitely stuff to celebrate. Here in Washington, our leaders are signaling their intent to transform and modernize the National Security Innovation Base. And our private sector, innovators, the entrepreneurs, technologists, the venture capitalists, they're answering the call with ingenuity and dynamism that help define America's innovation leadership. I want to thank a few people who support the NSIB report card. They are indispensable. Our knowledge partners at McKinsey & Company and our NSIB Program Advisory Board. Thank you. I also want to thank Snowpoint Ventures and all our partners for their support of our NSIB program. I think Doug Philippone is here someplace. Doug, especially thank you for being an early investor. Of course, you're sitting in front of me. Thank you, Doug. All right, close with words from our sponsor, our 40th president, President Reagan. On February 26, 1986, President Reagan addressed the nation in prime time from the Oval Office reflecting on 5 years of progress executing America's national defense program. This is what he said, quote, "Innovation is our advantage, but innovation is not enough. We have to follow through. Blueprints alone do not deter aggression. We have to translate our lead in the lab to lead in the field. This summit is about advancing that legacy. We face sophisticated adversaries at the forefront of developing cutting-edge technology with commercial and military applications. Now more than ever, we need to heed President Reagan's call to continue expanding our lead in the lab and ensure that it translates from the lab into the battlefield. As President Reagan understood, this is how we advance America's economic prosperity and preserve peace through strength today." Now, I'd like to welcome Mr. Fred Ryan, Chairman of the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation Institute, to introduce our first session. Fred. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here with us today. And thank you to Dave Trulio and Roger and the entire Reagan Institute team for putting together this terrific gathering. It's my honor to introduce our first session, a conversation that speaks to one of the most important dynamics shaping American national security today, the ability to drive real change through bipartisan leadership. Lasting progress on national security rarely comes from one party alone. And in a moment of intensifying global challenges, bipartisan leadership has never mattered more. Strengthening the national security, innovation, and industrial base has become a central priority for policymakers on both sides of the aisle. From scaling emerging technologies, to rebuilding industrial capacity, to accelerating the transition of innovation into operational capability, Congress plays a critical role in ensuring the United States can outpace evolving threats. We're fortunate this morning to be joined by two members of Congress who have emerged as leading voices in this effort and who continue to shape the conversation with their respective parties and across Congress. Senator Jim Banks of Indiana and Senator Ruben Gallego of Arizona. Together, they bring different approaches and perspectives, but a shared commitment to strengthening America's national security. Please join me in welcoming Senator Banks and Senator Gallego, along with our moderator, Brianna Riley of Punchbowl News. Thanks, Brianna.
It's going to be interesting little.
All right, thank you all for joining us this morning. I am joined, as mentioned, by esteemed Senator Jim Banks of Indiana and Senator Ruben Gallego of Arizona. These two joined the Senate in 2024 following their election then, but were longtime members of the House Armed Services Committee before that. And I actually want to draw on some of that experience as we open this dialogue for the inaugural session of this year's summit. Senator Banks, I'll actually start with you and make reference to your participation in the 2020 Future of Defense Task Force. Now, that panel produced recommendations to better integrate emerging technology into the existing defense apparatus, improve the adoption of AI, and aid the government in leveraging the innovation base. 6 years later, where do you think we're at? I mean, what's your assessment of how the national security innovation base is meeting emerging threats?
Well, first of all, it's great to be here. I'm such a big fan of the Reagan Institute and the serious conversations that are convened here at Roger Zakheim and everyone involved, from the forum at the Reagan Library to this event to the task forces that you have coordinated along the way that I've been a part of. Those have been valuable experiences for me that guide my work on the Armed Services Committee. Seth Moulton and I did the Future Defense Task Force. I think that was in my second term in the House. Chairman Mac Thornberry tasked us with doing it. It was interrupted by COVID. I think we had a 12-month charge. We published a report, and I remember many of the recommendations that we made in the report were related to artificial intelligence and autonomy, quantum computing. I mean, we were maybe ahead of the curve in what we were talking about. Your question is a good one. Have we made progress? I think we were. I think many of the recommendations that we've made maybe have been implemented. I think about Defense Innovation Unit. I mean, for me, the whole experience was educating myself and guiding my work on the committee and learning about what we do well at the Pentagon already, where we can improve, and making recommendations that. I think many of them have been legislated, but I also think about the Roger, the task force that y'all put together around the same time on defense industrial policy, and that was a serious effort that many people in this room were a part of too, and I think that was equally important and valuable to, especially with the younger group of us on the committee, that we Gallagher and Rubin and others that were part of those efforts on the committee, that we chewed into some of those recommendations. But guiding the way for more investment and autonomy, and pushing all of the branches to maybe change their culture in ways that would embrace autonomy. I think maybe we've made some progress, but certainly not enough.
And Senator Gallego, I want to get your thoughts as well. What is the current state of play from your vantage point? I mean, is Congress, is the administration doing enough to sort of bolster the innovation base? And are there any emerging technology areas that you want to see get more investment or attention?
Well, I mean, certainly was encouraging that they hire Emil Michael, someone who I think is respected across the board, both Democrats and Republicans. I've known him forever, since our college days, and any person that can bring Uber to the forefront is going to be able to bring a lot of tech and innovation to the Department of Defense. I think it's very difficult to actually ascribe success to this administration, not because it's of this administration, but because the nature of just warfare has changed so fast. And it'd be hard for any administration to actually adjust as fast as it has. We were talking about AI back in our day. We were on the House Armed Services Committee for almost 10 years together, right? And we're talking about AI and cybersecurity. We kind of started talking about drones. We never saw the scope of what drones were going to be able to do as fast as it did, and how fast the evolution of it became, and how our industrial base is actually misaligned with the threats that are out there right now. And even sometimes the demand signal that we need to send from our, through our NDAA or defense appropriations, is still not actually giving the right demand signal to industry for them to make the investments, both on the hard side, but also on the human side. Because sometimes it will be easier for them to actually put down the right type of widget factory. It's going to be harder for you to train the industrial-based worker and hold that industrial-based worker. And it may be even harder now when you have higher higher amounts of unemployment, where some of these workers are going to be fairly well trained, are going to be actually quite competitive in the future coming workforce. So there needs to be a lot more deeper understanding of what this workforce is that we're going to need, how we're going to train them, how we're going to retain them, and also how we're going to end up retraining them, because as the evolutions comes through innovation and tech, there's probably going to have to be a lot of new training grounds for this. The days of the guy coming out of the shop and training with the apprenticeship program, being able to go build that Liberty ship and then be able to do that for 20 years, those days are done. We're going to have to be retraining our workers all the time, and I don't know if we're right-sided. On the competitive side, or the non-defense side, I do see that. I think we had to bring some of that into the world that we want in the defense world.
Yeah, to follow on your workforce point, I think I want to drill down on the defense industrial base and acknowledge that the National Defense Strategy that was released at the end of January made supercharging the DIB one of its key priorities, key areas of focus. And Senator Banks, I want to direct this question to you as a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. Do you think the forthcoming NDAA can help sort of get at those challenges? And specifically the National Defense Strategy mentioned, quote, empowering innovators. I mean, can lawmakers use the NDAA to help make that a reality?
Well, we have to, but it's also a funding issue. $25 billion in the reconciliation just for munitions. And if we're learning anything from Iran, how quickly we're depleting our munitions, we recognize that we have to do more to invest there. And the industrial base plays a big role in that. Indiana is the crossroads of America, but we're also the crossroads of the DIB, with the defense manufacturing base that we have in my state, from Raytheon, BAE, L3, Rolls-Royce, Ultra, AM General. I mean, all these great companies. Ruben's point, I mean, what they're doing today is going to be a lot different than what they're doing tomorrow. So we have to maintain that workforce and keep these companies in business, but also help them to adapt. And big news just a couple of weeks ago at Crane Navy Base, the third largest Navy base in the world in Indiana, completely landlocked, is also the The Army part of Crane stores 25% of the Army's traditional munitions. So a big groundbreaking there a couple of weeks ago, directly related to the big beautiful bill, $25 billion in munitions, a partnership between Kratos and Rafael from Israel to build solid rocket motors. That's a real example of the type of investment that we have to make to win in Iran. We need a supplemental on Iran, by the way, to help us restore our munitions and keep investing there too. But the NDAA has to go dig further into the industrial base and tackle that subject, especially back to the munitions. And I'll quit rambling. I mean, every single war game that we've seen in Taiwan plays out that we run out of munitions in 1 week. So that being the case, it all comes back to the industrial base and what we can do to restore it in places like Indiana and Arizona.
I want to follow on your point about funding and sort of the demand signals that this administration and Congress are sending to the defense industrial base and the innovation ecosystem. And they've been inconsistent, to put it mildly, right? You can push back on that assertion, Senator Gallego. But I think what I want to ask you about is there seems to be some mixed signals, at least in recent months, about the administration's posture towards the defense industrial base, right? We have, on one hand, this $1.5 trillion top line for FY27. We have talk of a supplemental forthcoming that could be in the tens of billions of dollars for Iran. But then we also have sort of these crackdowns on defense prime contractor performance. And I just wonder what you make of that situation. And Senator Gallego, do you see a path forward for both approving a 1.5 top line for the military while also potentially approving as much as $50 billion in a supplemental?
Oh, you're trying to make news today. Well, first, what the White House is doing, I think they're trying to figure it out. I think this is I'm not going to ascribe any nefarious reasons to it. I think it's a very changing, evolving world, and they're trying to, really get their feet under them to figure out how to move forward and how to invest. And it's not easy. Obviously, things have changed very, very fast. I do think that business, even if it's defense tech companies or defense companies in general, need transparency and they need predictability. If we're changing contracts and if we're changing the incentives, there's going to be bad outcomes there. We have, much like, Indiana, Arizona has a lot of defense tech jobs. A lot of our companies do huge corporate, layouts that are dependent on, future contracts coming in. That kind of ties and binds the administration, whether it's the Democrats or Republican in charge, to a certain type of defense policy. That is unfortunate. I think that sometimes, creates the NDA versus the NDA being, created from a defense policy perspective and then ascribing what we need. In some regards, we kind of have to do that because if we don't do that, we're not going to have an actual industrial base because then we'll be shutting down and opening up all the time, right? I think we need to be doing things in a dual track where we are consistently, keeping our defense companies, ready, armed, helping them innovate too, and there could be real investment structures to that. We need to also help kind of your smaller, startup companies be able to quickly scale up. Whether it's on the AI side, or whether it's on the small drone experimental side. And one of the things that you've seen, both from the Ukrainians, even from the Russians themselves, is that they've been able to take and bring to market and scale some fairly sophisticated and cheap munitions quite quickly in the span of 2.5 years. I cannot see the U.S. doing that if we had to. And that's a very scary situation because, China's learning everything that Ukraine is doing. China's learning everything that Russia is doing. China's seeing how we're responding. Right now we're potentially going to be outshot by the Iranians. I can't imagine what the Chinese can do. Where we are in terms of $1.5 trillion, it has to be, the details really matter. That is a lot of money. Let's just be clear. A lot of money. It's a lot of money we're borrowing. And I need to see exactly how it's going to be done, what's going to be used for, and where the number came from. There tends to be a lot of round numbers from this administration, And as much as I am a more odd number guy than a round number guy, it should be designed around what the needs are and not around the want for a round number. In terms of munitions, I think this was a ill-planned offensive war by this administration. I think it was not thoroughly thought out whatsoever. And I think until I see a real plan about how we're going to, what is victory here? What does that look like? How does this end? I have a very tough time seeing me give further money to extend something that I think has been a very foolish war.
I want to follow up on the Iran point that you made and turn to Senator Banks regarding counter-drone technology. We have seen, the Shahed drones being used in the battlefield against Ukraine. I mean, Ukraine has been sort of very effective in developing counter-drone capabilities, but it does not seem, at least according to public reporting, that the U.S. has really